Dolly Parton, the most powerful woman in Nashville, once uttered a statement filled with quiet humility. There's really only three real female singers in the world: Streisand, Ronstadt, and Connie Smith. The rest of us are just pretending. And still, Connie Smith, the very woman held up in that praise, was also the one who sat in the shadows the longest and whispered that she wished her voice had never existed. Why would someone whose debut hit stayed at #1 for 8 weeks, who placed more than 30 songs in the top 40, and who was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame sink into such depths of despair? It all began with a cold childhood marked by relentless beatings, with nights spent clutching her children and crying through divorces caused by the crushing weight of fame, and with severe bouts of depression, where the smile on stage was nothing more than a fragile shell concealing a soul falling apart. All of it quietly gnawed away at the woman everyone believed to be unbreakable. Today, we will explore the tear-soaked yet hopeful journey of Connie Smith, a woman who proves that the quietest hearts are often the strongest. Connie Smith was born on the 14th of August, 1941, in Elkhart, Indiana. In a cramped house where rare laughter was drowned out by constant arguments and an ever-present sense of fear, something that would shape her life for a long time afterward. Her family had as many as 14 children. But in that house, what appeared most often was not lullabies or children's laughter, but the sharp smell of alcohol and the unpredictable rages of her father, Hobart Medor. He was a severe alcoholic, and whenever the liquor took hold, violence became the most familiar language in the home. For Connie, childhood was not measured in years, but in long nights of holding her breath, waiting to see whether her father would be silent or erupt in fury that day. Connie's earliest memories were not tied to toys or school, but to the image of her mother, Wilma, being beaten until she lost consciousness. There were times when the children had to pull each other into a cold corner of the kitchen, huddling on the floor, not daring to cry out loud for fear of making the rage worse. Violence was not a rare incident, but a daily rhythm of life. Connie grew up in constant vigilance, learning to listen to every footstep, every door opening, every heavy breath in the night. Fear did not need to scream. It smoldered quietly, rooted itself in every cell, and became part of who she was from a very early age. When Connie was 7 years old, her mother Wilma made a decision that may have saved her children's lives, even though the price was another life just as harsh. She gathered the children and fled from her abusive husband, leaving Indiana for West Virginia, where she herself had grown up. There was no clear plan, no money, only a fragile hope that somewhere else, at least, they would no longer be beaten. That freedom quickly took shape as a dilapidated shack, lacking everything, in a poor mountainous area, its tin roof riddled with holes. Winters in West Virginia cut to the bone. Food was scarce. Warmth came only from thin blankets. But Wilma still did everything she could to keep her children from going hungry. From elementary school onward, Connie had to work. She washed dishes, picked potatoes, did any job she could to add a few more cents to the family's income. No one in the house told her that childhood should be protected, simply because there was no other choice. But in the midst of all that deprivation, Connie had one very specific, very childlike, and also very unusual desire. She wanted to buy an old radio, something that, to her at the time, felt like a small door opening to another world. When Connie finally managed to buy that radio, music began to enter her life. In the evenings, when the children gathered around the weak fire, Connie turned the dial, and country music poured in like a form of comfort. Hank Williams with his aching voice, Kitty Wells telling stories of women's pain, Gene Shepherd singing with resilient strength. All of it touched Connie's young heart.
Don't you think maybe we could find us a brand new recipe?
On freezing winter nights, when the entire shack sank into darkness, Connie sang lullabies to her younger siblings using the melodies she had heard from that radio. There was no stage, no audience, only loneliness and the responsibility of a child forced to grow up too soon. But it was in those moments that Connie's voice began to take shape, born from the need to be comforted and to comfort others. Later in life, Connie would say that she did not remember learning how to sing, only that she needed to sing in order to survive. In a world that was not safe, music was the only thing that never hit her, never abandoned her, never demanded conditions. Then tragedy struck again, as if fate refused to leave her in peace. At 17, while Connie was cutting grass with an old lawnmower, an accident happened. The sharp blade swept across her leg, nearly severing it completely, and in the panic she fell hard, seriously injuring her right arm, leaving it almost paralyzed. Doctors at the local hospital looked at her injuries and shook their heads. "Girl, you may never be able to use your hand normally again." For a young girl, it sounded like a sentence. Connie lay in her hospital bed, tears falling silently, wondering why life could be so cruel to someone who had never harmed anyone. But Connie did not know how to give up, because her entire childhood had already been a series of days when surrender was not allowed. During the long months of recovery, as her body endured pain, her soul turned toward music more than ever. She sang like a prayer, to forget the pain and to hold on to a thin thread of hope that she still existed. Later, when she had partially recovered, she taught herself guitar, not to play anything complex, but simply to accompany her own voice. No teacher, no big stage, only a quiet resilience, something that would later become the foundation for far greater challenges in her life. But when she stepped into the professional music world, would the bright stage lights be enough to chase away the shadows still hiding inside her? Or would they return, stronger than ever, demanding even greater endurance from her? In 1961, at only 20 years old, Connie Smith entered her first marriage with a fragile hope for a stable family. Her husband was Jerry Smith, a man who worked at a steel plant in Beverly, Ohio. They soon had their first son, Darren Justin, born on the 9th of March, 1963. Connie believed this would be the beginning of a peaceful life, where she could be a mother, a wife, and quietly nurture her musical dream in calm evenings. But like many decisions born from the desire to escape the past, that happiness was heartbreakingly brief. Differences in values, in views on life, and the pressure of raising a young child quickly fractured the marriage. They divorced just a few years later, leaving Connie still only in her early 20s, alone with a small child, without support from her former husband, and without a stable income. She moved back to rural West Virginia, where the familiar hills of her childhood now became a very real burden. To support her son, Connie worked at a refrigerator factory, enduring long, exhausting shifts, her hands and feet numbed by the cold. Every morning, she woke before dawn, prepared Darren, left him with relatives or neighbors, and then threw herself into the production line. The noise of the machinery drowned out all thoughts. But at night, when she returned to her small home, despair flooded in and wore her down. The dream of singing felt impossibly distant, smothered by harsh reality. A single mother, no money, no opportunities. She later recalled nights when she sat beside her son's bed, tears falling quietly, asking herself whether there was still any place in life for a voice like hers. But in that darkness, music, as always, did not disappear. It simply waited for Connie to return. At night, when Darren was fast asleep, Connie turned on her old radio, picked up her guitar, and softly sang along with Kitty Wells and Jean Shepherd, women who had sung about pain, sacrifice, and loneliness long before society was ready to listen to them. Connie was not trying to be outstanding. She sang to keep herself from collapsing. Once, she admitted that music during that period felt like a thin thread, but it was the only thing holding her to life. "If I didn't sing," Connie once said, "I don't know what I would have done to keep going then." When everything seemed destined to become a quiet life spent in a factory, an unexpected turning point appeared. In 1963, at the Franklin County Fair in Ohio, there was an ordinary local performance that Connie joined simply to test herself. It was the first time she stood on stage alone, without friends, without a band. But when Connie opened her mouth, something strange happened. The crowd that had been chatting suddenly fell silent. Her gentle but powerful voice, full of emotion, sounded like a retelling of pain, striking directly at the hearts of those present. When the song ended, the applause erupted and would not stop. Among the audience was Bill Anderson, a famous songwriter from the Grand Ole Opry, who was searching for new voices. He was drawn to the honesty in that voice, and right after the performance, he approached Connie. "Girl, your voice is something special. Let me help you record a demo." For Connie, that invitation felt like a miracle and a threat at the same time. She hesitated, because she was only a single mother, and she feared that Nashville, the city of lights and fame, would swallow her fragile life whole. But Bill persisted, and in the end, she agreed. Carrying heavy anxiety, Connie left her familiar countryside for the first time. She stepped into the recording studio, hands trembling as she held the microphone, and recorded "Once a Day," a ballad written by Bill Anderson himself, a song that told the story of love's pain in a simple but piercing way. At that moment, Connie carried no grand expectations. She only thought she was doing something she needed to do. What happened next went far beyond anything she had imagined. "Once a Day" became Connie Smith's debut single, and it did more than succeed, it set a record. Just months after its release, in August 1964, it climbed straight to #1 on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart. Not for 1 week, but for 8 consecutive weeks. It was a record for a female solo country artist that stood for nearly 50 years, only broken decades later by Taylor Swift. Connie became the first female artist to have a debut single reach #1, breaking through a genre long dominated by men. Success arrived like a whirlwind. Connie was invited to the Grand Ole Opry. The press called her the Cinderella of country music, and fans flocked to see her perform. Fame brought money, opportunities, and recognition she had never dared to dream of. But the irony was this: as all of America began to know the name Connie Smith, Connie herself felt like an imposter. She stood there under the bright lights, singing hit songs, while a voice inside whispered, "I don't deserve this. I'm just a poor girl from West Virginia, with a past full of scars." The fears from her childhood still haunted her, leaving her insecure even as her voice reached millions of hearts. Connie once described that feeling in very simple words. "I kept thinking they would find out that I didn't belong here. Success came too fast, too big, while inside she was still a woman accustomed to enduring rather than enjoying." Music had carried her out of the factory, but it also placed her in a new world filled with pressure. Connie knew that her voice touched others because it carried real pain. That same truth kept her from ever feeling safe within the spotlight. From 1964 through the early 1970s, Connie Smith entered a period that, to outside observers, could be summed up in a single word: the peak. She released hit after hit, shaking the Billboard country charts time and again. More than 30 songs made the top 40, with 19 of them climbing all the way into the top 10, numbers that any female country artist of that era could only dream of. Then and only then, with its aching melody about an unfinished love, the profound loneliness of Ain't Had No Lovin', Cincinnati, Ohio, telling the story of a woman waiting in vain, and I Never Once Stopped Loving You, a ballad that left listeners choking up because of its unhidden sincerity. Connie's voice poured out of radios across America, slipping into living rooms, long-haul trucks, small southern bars, and even kitchens where women cooked while quietly listening to music. Connie was more than a hitmaker. She became a new standard for female singers in country music, without the need for showiness, without excessive drama, relying only on honesty. On stage, Connie Smith stood there with a calm that felt almost modest. No elaborate choreography, no effort to make herself bigger than the music. For many women, Connie felt like someone speaking the words they did not know how to say. Loneliness within marriage, silent sacrifice, loving without being loved in return, and the feeling of having to stay strong even when exhaustion had already settled deep inside. The Grand Ole Opry quickly became her second home, where Connie appeared regularly, wearing shimmering dresses and smiling brightly before thousands of audience members. She joined the Lawrence Welk Show, acted in films, and toured relentlessly. Fame brought everything: money, admiration, and a pioneering status. Fans wrote her hundreds of letters every week, and the press called her the Golden Voice of Nashville. Behind the stage lights, shadows slowly crept in. A packed schedule, flying from one city to another, performing night after night at a pace Connie had never known before, gradually drained her. The media began scrutinizing every detail: how she dressed, how she sang, how she mothered, how she lived as a wife. Fans demanded an unending presence, as if that voice belonged to them more than it belonged to Connie herself. Connie's personal life also fractured, again and again. After divorcing Jerry Smith, she married Jack Watkins, the guitarist in her touring band, in the mid-1960s. They had a son, Kerry, but the marriage lasted less than a year. Pressure from the performance schedule, differences in lifestyle, and the feeling of being misunderstood caused everything to fall apart quickly. Not long after, she met Marshall Haynes, a telephone repairman, and they married in 1968 after 2 years of dating. This marriage lasted longer and brought 3 daughters into the world: Jane, Julie, and Jody. Haynes often traveled with her on tour, trying to offer support, but Connie's overwhelming workload left them with very little time together. She described herself as overly sensitive, easily wounded by careless words, with small misunderstandings piling up into vast distances. Each failed marriage was not only a personal defeat, it also reinforced within Connie the feeling that something was wrong with her. She began to question whether she was capable of being a wife, a life partner, or even a normal human being at all. The greater her success in the outside world grew, the deeper her sense of failure sank inside. Then, almost as an inevitable law, depression arrived, quietly but powerfully. In later conversations, Connie admitted that there were moments when she stood on stage, smiling brightly, singing with all her strength, while inside there was only a vast emptiness. She began to feel detached from her own body and emotions. She thought many times about withdrawing completely, not because she hated music, but because she no longer recognized herself within that whirlwind of fame. At times, Connie wanted to disappear, not in a tragic sense, but in the way of someone too tired to keep explaining, to keep trying, to keep pleasing everyone. She once said that the hardest thing was not singing in front of thousands of people, but living with herself when the lights went out. And still, she stepped back onto the stage and kept singing, because music was the only thing that continued to anchor her to life. Amid all the tragedy, Connie preserved her artistic integrity. She did not chase trends. She did not record hollow songs simply to climb the charts. Every song she chose was rooted in truth, stories of loneliness, sacrifice, and incomplete love that women often keep hidden. She sang on behalf of women like herself, single mothers, wives waiting in vain, broken hearts that still force themselves to stand upright. That honesty made her voice enduring, even as she herself struggled with pain. Some people said that this made Connie out of step with the times. For her, this was not a strategic choice. It was instinct. She could not sing things she did not believe. In an industry saturated with commercial pressure, that in itself was a form of resilience, quiet but enduring. Looking back on this period, it is easy to label it Connie Smith's golden era. For Connie herself, These were years when light and darkness intertwined so tightly that they could not be separated. Success deepened her voice, and at the same time carved deeper into old wounds. Every note carried both the beauty of truth and the price demanded by it. Connie did not become harder after all of this. She became deeper, and that was both a gift and a burden. In the end, precisely when everything seemed to reach the limits of endurance, Connie Smith began searching for something beyond music and fame. A place of support that did not require her to be perfect, that did not demand constant strength. And there, amid those years filled with contradiction, a new door slowly began to open. In 1968, Connie Smith discovered a source of light she had never known before: Christianity. At the moment she became a born-again Christian, a profound inner transformation began to take shape. There was no stage, no audience, no spotlight. There was only a woman facing her own emptiness and admitting that she needed support. In later years, Connie never said that faith had healed her in a miraculous way. She said it brought her comfort, and sometimes that alone was more than enough. From that point on, Connie's music began to breathe differently. She recorded gospel more frequently, not to replace country music, but to complement it. Hymns such as "How Great Thou Art" and "Peace in the Valley," becoming indispensable parts of her performances. She sang them openly at concerts, at the Grand Ole Opry, and at every venue, never shying away from expressing her faith. Audiences saw a different Connie, still gentle, still sincere, but now carrying a deep sense of peace, as if she were singing not only for them, but also for her own soul. Some people embraced it, others felt uncomfortable. In an industry already cautious about overt displays of religion, Connie understood that she was placing her career into another kind of risk. Unlike before, this time she no longer tried to please everyone. Faith gave her a new anchor. If there had to be a price, she knew exactly what she was paying it for. By the late 1970s, when depression had grown too heavy to keep pretending everything was fine, Connie made a decision many found difficult to understand. She stepped back from the music industry, not a total abandonment, but a retreat from the brutal cycle of touring and expectations, a pause to seek treatment, to spend time with her 5 children who needed their mother, and to focus on her faith. Her contract with Columbia Records at the time, through a rare arrangement, allowed her to release one gospel album each year, an almost miraculous alignment, as if God had opened a path for her to keep music in her life without sacrificing her health or her family. During this period, Connie lived far more quietly. Gospel albums like God is Abundant, along with recordings honoring Hank Williams through a sacred lens, became the places where she poured out every remaining trace of pain. They did not erase the scars. They helped her face them, forgive herself, and forgive those who had hurt her. Connie once shared that faith gave her a reason to go on, not for fame, but for the hope that every pain carries a purpose. Then, in 1997, Connie's life opened into a new chapter filled with surprise and warmth. She married Marty Stewart, a gifted country singer 17 years her junior, who had been her fan since childhood. They first met decades earlier, when Marty was still a boy watching Connie perform on stage. Marty once told his mother that one day he would marry Connie Smith, and those words became reality many years later. Marty brought Connie unconditional love, without judging her past, without demanding that she be a flawless star, simply staying by her side and loving her as she truly was. It was Marty who encouraged Connie to return to the stage. In 1998, she released a comeback album after a long period of silence. Then in 2003, together with Sharon White and Barbara Fairchild, Connie recorded Love Never Fails, a deeply emotional gospel album where 3 female voices intertwined, singing about God's everlasting love and the power of forgiveness, becoming more of a spiritual milestone than a commercial one. Marty took part in the production, offering support and becoming a steady pillar, helping Connie rediscover joy in singing without the weight of loneliness. At this stage, faith was no longer a place for Connie to hide. It became part of everyday life. She attended church regularly, sang hymns without an audience in mind, and spoke to younger artists not with career advice, but through the way she lived. Connie never romanticized her path. She spoke plainly, saying that depression did not disappear and painful memories remained. She had learned, though, not to let those things define her entire self. In 2021, when the COVID-19 pandemic swept across the United States, Connie Smith faced another trial at an age when many had chosen to rest. Connie contracted a severe case of COVID-19 and was rushed to the hospital with sepsis and double pneumonia. At one point, her condition was described as critical. Doctors worried. Her family feared the worst. But Connie, lying in her hospital bed, held tightly to Marty's hand and prayed. Faith and the constant support of her husband carried her through. She recovered slowly, and from that experience came the album The Cry of the Heart, a work filled with spiritual strength, where Connie's voice still trembled with emotion as it always had, now carrying a resilience forged through fire. That album was more than music. It was a testament that even when the body grows weaker, the soul can still sing hope. Faith became the key to Connie Smith's resilience, turning every tragedy into a journey of forgiveness and hope. From her darkest days, she found light, and that light not only saved her, but spread outward, becoming an enduring legacy. In 2012, after nearly 5 decades on a thorn-filled musical path, Connie Smith received the greatest honor of her career, induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame. She became the 12th female artist to enter that hall, where the greatest names in country music are permanently enshrined. The ceremony unfolded in an atmosphere both solemn and warm. And when Dolly Parton, her friend, her colleague, and one of the most powerful figures in Nashville, stepped onto the stage to introduce her, the entire room fell silent. Dolly, with her unmistakable sincerity, spoke words that would be quoted countless times afterward. There's really only 3 real female singers in the world: Streisand, Ronstadt, and Connie Smith. The rest of us are just pretending. That praise was more than recognition of talent. It was proof that Connie had redefined the female voice in country music, not through glitter or showy technique, but through honesty, through letting pain and faith flow freely through every note. Connie stood there, tears quietly falling, holding the plaque of honor, and in that moment, every tragedy from a cold childhood to lonely nights of depression seemed, at last, gently soothed. Connie's legacy does not rest on the number of hits or awards, though she has enough to command respect. More than 30 top 40 songs, 19 top 10 hits, decades on the Grand Ole Opry stage, it lies in the way she opened doors for women. When she arrived in Nashville in the 1960s, country music was still filled with cowboy tales, drinking songs, men who left home and returned as if nothing had happened. While women were left to gather the broken pieces, Connie chose a completely different path. She carried the voices of the women who stayed behind, those who believed in God while doubting themselves, those who loved deeply, sacrificed quietly, and hurt alone. That choice carved out a new path, shaping future generations in lasting ways. Emmylou Harris once admitted that Connie showed her gentleness can carry the weight of truth. Patty Loveless learned from Connie how to preserve Appalachian earthiness, even while standing in glamorous Nashville. Miranda Lambert, though from a much later generation, has spoken of Connie as proof that female country singers do not need to be as tough as men to earn respect. They can be soft and still strong. Connie's songs became a psychological archive of America, faith in the midst of suffering, sorrow without easy answers, rural identity where people keep standing even as life remains harsh. They're more than music, they're living stories, quiet comforts for millions who once felt forgotten. Now, in 2026, Connie is 85 years old. Age brings its burdens, slower steps, a voice that sometimes trembles with health, aching joints that make movement difficult. She still appears at the Grand Ole Opry, where she has been a member since 1965, still standing on that familiar stage, singing old songs and new hymns. She also appears on Marty Stewart's program on RFD TV, where the couple share everyday stories, laugh together, and sing side by side. Though her body is no longer what it once was, Connie still smiles and says to Marty, with gentle warmth, "As long as I can stand, I'll sing." Those words are not boastful. They are a declaration that music has become her breath, her way of holding on to life and hope. Their family is now complete. 5 children, many grandchildren, simple dinners, regular church visits. They gather in a peaceful home where children's laughter mingles with the sound of hymns from the living room. In an industry that thrives on digging into tragedy, Connie's calm has become something rare and precious. Even in this peaceful stage, life still brings smaller trials. In 2025, both Connie and Marty contracted COVID-19 for a second time. This bout proved more severe than expected, forcing them to cancel the celebration of her 60th anniversary with the Grand Ole Opry, a major event the entire country community had awaited, where Connie planned to sing her early hits and share her journey. Marty, mixing sadness with optimism, called it COVID's unwanted presence in our house, a gentle phrase meant to soften deep worry. They isolated for a time, and after recovery, though their health declined somewhat, they continued holding hands in prayer, believing their return would come. Away from the stage, Connie continued what she had always done quietly, participating in gospel work and discreet charity through her local church, singing hymns at small services, donating to underprivileged children, and silently supporting those struggling with depression, a community she understood more deeply than most. Now, Connie no longer regrets any melody in her life. She reflects on the journey with peace, a life full of tears and full of hope, marked by loss and by healing. In private moments, when speaking of Marty, Connie once said something unforgettable. "I feel loved the right way, and that heals everything." Those words were not only for a husband 17 years younger, they summed up her long journey. True love, even when it arrives late, still holds the power to heal the deepest wounds. Connie Smith did not become an icon because she conquered every tragedy. She became an icon because she allowed herself to be vulnerable and still kept moving forward. Her legacy does not live only in vinyl records, in halls of fame, or in praise from later generations. It lives in a quiet philosophy that gentleness can ignite a revolution, that honesty never goes out of style, and that a voice, when it is truthful enough, can remain forever, even as time takes almost everything else away. Connie Smith, today, is no longer the dazzling peak of glory. She is a slow-burning flame, not blinding, but enduring, reminding us that in music, as in life, what lasts longest is always sincerity. If Connie Smith's story touches you at any moment, whether through an old song echoing in memory, a familiar sadness, or simply the feeling of being understood, do not let that emotion drift away unnoticed. Please press like to support stories told with respect and honesty. Subscribe so you will not miss the journeys behind the stage lights, where legends not only shine, but also fall like any other human being. And if you have a memory, a Connie song that walked with you through difficult years, leave a comment. Finally, share this video with friends who love country music, or with anyone who believes gentleness is not weakness. Sometimes, one truthful voice, one story told the right way, can help us believe a little more in life and in ourselves.